South African President and the African Union Chairperson Cyril Ramaphosa heads to the United Nations General Assembly after skipping last year's G8. Should Mozambique be in his address to the world's most powerful? Good evening, I'm Aldrin St-Pierre and this is African Perspective. Zanu-PF leader Emmerson Mnangagwa says his party will continue to interact with the ANC as a sister party. The two parties met last week to discuss current reports of human rights violations in that country. Addressing the Politburo, Mnangagwa was non-committal about the second visit of the South African delegation.
The party received a delegation from our sister party, the ANC. We continue as former liberation movements to share experiences and strategies in view of the ongoing onslaught by our detractors and the neo-colonialists. Such solidarity and exchanges must be strengthened across all the leagues of our parties. As I explained before, the truth must be told that presidential envoys remain presidential envoys from one president to another. Party envoys remain party envoys from one party to another. Those who dream otherwise are allowed in democracy to dream.
Meanwhile, the ANC alliance partner, the South African Communist Party, says the leadership in Zimbabwe must be honest with the situation in the country.
It's not a sign of weakness to admit that on the part of any ruling party or movement in any country for that matter, or in the region. We know in South Africa that the movement, for instance, the migration from the rest of the SADC region into South Africa, this is not a xenophobic statement, Sophie, it's just describing a reality, is a sign of this crisis. I know of many Zimbabweans who would not like to be in South Africa for that matter. But they are here because they are legitimately, many of them, trying to make a living, make ends meet. In other words, what we are having here are increasingly what one would call economic refugees. So to deny that there is a crisis, or even in Zimbabwe, is just semantics, really. We will be able, sometimes it's said that understanding and describing properly the nature of the problem, you are already halfway towards addressing the problem. And it's not a sign of weakness to actually admit that there is a crisis, a socio-economic crisis in the region, most of the African continent, frankly, worsened and exposed by COVID-19, by the way. There may be specific issues relating to Zimbabwe that, as we say in our statement, Zimbabweans themselves must solve this problem. But as the SABC, we are also saying international solidarity with Zimbabweans is important. So is the role of SADC and the African Union. So that is our approach to understanding the situation in Zimbabwe. We are not being judgmental. We ourselves, if you look at our statement, is identifying the many crisis areas and crisis points that we have as a country. And that's not a sign of being weak. The sign of weakness actually is denialism.
Meanwhile, South Africa's state agency says it does not believe Zimbabwe would jeopardize bilateral relations by sending their own spies to bring activists and politicians who are in self-imposed exile into the country. There have been numerous reports that Zimbabwean agents crossed the border in order to repatriate the G40. This is a group which consists of Zanu-PF members who supported former President Robert Mugabe and his wife Grace. Gift Ngobeni reports.
Allegations of abductions in Zimbabwe have been rife lately as government cracks down on alleged dissidents. Those who fled to South Africa fearing for their lives say they believe agents have followed them across the border. Another group which is allegedly being hunted is a former faction within the ruling party, the G40. These reports have caused concern for South Africa's state security agency.
South Africa and Zimbabwe actually have very good and frank relations. Even though there may be notable differences here and there, which is a typical feature of relations between neighboring countries. It would be extremely atypical of Zimbabwe to violate the sovereignty of South Africa in the manner that is suggested by these media posts. In fact, Zimbabwe understands the international and continental protocols that apply to its own sovereignty. So they would be very careful not to disrespect the territorial integrity of another sovereign state.
The SSA is now also dealing with an alleged threat by Iran. The Middle Eastern country is apparently preparing a revenge attack on United States Ambassador to South Africa, Lana Marks. An Iranian army general was assassinated by a US drone while in Iraq in January.
The agency is therefore working with stakeholders inside the country and outside the borders of our country, particularly the US officials. She has accordingly made a commitment that she will be meeting the two ambassadors of the US and of Iran to discuss this matter further, but also to discuss other matters of common interest between these respective countries and South Africa. Because South Africa enjoys cordial diplomatic relations with both countries. So the minister will meet the two ambassadors and they will have a discussion on all of this.
The SSA says the report following the investigation is unlikely to be made public. Gift Ngobeni, SABC News.
And SABC Foreign Desk Editor now joins us, Sophie Mukwena. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective. Let's start off here just listening into what Emmerson Mnangagwa had to say there about a delegation being sent to another president means exactly that, how should we interpret this? Does this mean that they were quite clear during both those meetings that, listen, if you send a delegation, that delegation comes from the president and that delegation must meet with the president. If you send a delegation to meet with the party, that delegation must only meet with the party.
That's exactly what Mnangagwa is saying. He's saying that you can't send the envoy and expect the envoy to meet the opposition or the stakeholders. And therefore, the meeting will be between the envoy and the government of Zimbabwe led by Emmerson Mnangagwa. When you send the political delegation, it will be sister parties. And therefore, the meeting will be between Zanu-PF and the ANC. But if you recall the statement made by the General Secretary, the Secretary General of the ANC upon arrival, and also Tony Ngeni, a member of the NEC who's responsible for peace and security, and Lindiwe Zulu, the International Relations Chair, they also gave an indication that there was no agreement around this issue. If you recall, they said they presented a message that they will come and continue to meet with their counterparts, but they would also want to meet the opposition and stakeholders. But if that doesn't happen, the meeting will definitely take place in South Africa. That speaks to the divisions.
So then how should we understand that particular assertion coming from Emmerson Mnangagwa vis-a-vis what the SACP's General Secretary is saying there about also speaking about international solidarity?
Well, clearly SACP is saying we have to discuss the situation of Zimbabwe with earnest and also with honest. And we must ensure that it is a frank discussion. And therefore, you can't deny that there are challenges in Zimbabwe. We know there are economic challenges. We know that the economy is not doing well. And therefore, you add the issue of COVID-19. It's an added problem there. And therefore, people tend to cross the borders. And they cross the border illegally so to come and look for greener pastures in South Africa. But you also have those who have fled the country because they are making allegations that they are being harassed by the security forces in that country. And therefore, South Africa, as we speak, is hosting a number of Zimbabweans, and people are counting up to almost more than 2 million Zimbabweans in South Africa. You add to other countries as well. This is becoming a real burden to South Africa. With COVID-19, the South African government is trying its best to ensure that it is addressing the challenges facing its own citizens. But you'd recall that the Constitutional Court of South Africa has made a ruling that anyone who is in this country, South Africa must look after that particular person. And therefore, whatever measures South Africa is taking to cushion the citizens of this country, they must do the same with the foreign nationals who are here legally or illegally. And therefore, it is becoming a burden to South Africa. I spoke to one senior official in South Africa who told me that when they look at paying people money to ensure that they can survive during COVID-19, they will have to pay all the foreign nationals in South Africa. And therefore, it's going to be very difficult for South Africa. You know that when you look at social media, South Africans are becoming restless because of the challenges they are facing, and some are pointing to a number of foreign nationals in the country. And you know, when South Africa has to deal with issues of xenophobia, it becomes a real problem. Tomorrow, the Human Rights Watch is going, and Amnesty International, they are going to release a report on xenophobia. And I am pretty confident that it is going to be scathing. And these are the issues that South Africa is avoiding. And that is why SACP is saying, yes, you may say there's no problem in Zimbabwe, but there is a problem in South Africa, and Zimbabwe is part of that problem.
And all of this is taking place as South Africa continues to chair the African Union.
Indeed, but you know that the envoy that President Ramaphosa sent to Zimbabwe, it was at the country level, it wasn't at the AU level. I think he is still interacting with his counterparts as the chair of the AU, and perhaps there will be a mandate to look into Zimbabwe. But for now, Zimbabwe is not on the agenda of the AU, neither is Zimbabwe on the agenda of the Security Council.
And the president speaking about some of the achievements?
The president speaking about the achievements in terms of combating COVID-19, indeed the numbers are down, but we know that the World Health Organization has given an indication that it is during this time where we have to be really vigilant, because we can experience a second wave, and it will be a problem to control the second wave, because it will not be perhaps small numbers, it will be large numbers, because it will be clusters. And therefore, we must remain vigilant. He has introduced certain measures that speaks to level 1, and also the issue of traveling, international traveling, but with caution that there will be at the airport or any entry points very strict measures taken in line with the health protocol. But he also took time to thank the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, the role he played to assist South Africa. You are aware that some WHO officials are here to assist South Africa, but also taking time to thank the WHO on behalf of Africa as the AU chair. Let's take a listen at what President Cyril Ramaphosa had to say in his capacity as the president of South Africa, but also the chair of the African Union.
Okay, we don't seem to have that clip there from the president as he was speaking about some of the achievements that have been made so far. But also the president faces another tough one this week, and that is heading to the United Nations General Assembly.
Yes, the president on Friday is going to participate on one of the virtual meetings of the United Nations. And I think there the message will be clear. The developed nations, please help the developing nations, particularly the G20 and the G7. You know that he has made an appeal that particularly the poorer countries must get help from the rich countries. And we know that the whole United Nations General Assembly this time around is going to focus on COVID-19. I participated in a number of fellowship programs since yesterday from 3 o'clock to 7 in the evening. The main issue here is all around COVID-19, the refugees, the economy and all that. And I think the heads of government and states, they will also look at the issue of COVID-19 with the aim of perhaps sharing ideas in terms of how the world economy can be revived. We had the World Health Organization last week saying that the globe has lost 13 trillion US dollars, and the damage will continue because currently we don't have a vaccine. As long as there's no vaccine, we cannot speak about business as usual. And therefore, let us listen at Sharon Bryce-Pease and the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, during the press conference when they were talking about the UNGA this year.
Have you given any greater thought to what this virtual summit will mean for the UN General Assembly's high-level week moving forward? As you well know, this is an annual event that happens in one of the most expensive cities anywhere in the world. The dollar currency is one of the strongest currencies globally. For example, the South African rand, you require 17 rands for $1, which means it's very expensive for large delegations in terms of travel costs, in terms of hotel accommodation, in terms of transportation, security, logistics, and the like. Do the outcomes of high-level week justify the expense that is associated with coming to this event in the context of the shrinking fiscal space brought on by this pandemic and the growing socio-economic needs that have been laid bare by it?
Well, first of all, this week will not see this massive presence of delegations coming from all over the world. This week will be a week in which the general debate will be done through messages recorded by the heads of state. By the way, the largest number of heads of state and government ever recorded in their own countries and then broadcasted in the General Assembly room with the presence of the permanent representatives, but without delegations coming from the capitals. So your concern about expenditure will not materialize. But I have to say that diplomacy, to be effective, requires personal contact. And I myself am very sorry that we are not going to have, knowing that there are costs associated, I'm very sorry that we are not going to have the opportunity to bring together leaders of countries and that to be able to, for all those involved in conflicts like the Libya conflict or like the Yemeni conflict or any other one, or leaders that have an important initiative in key areas, be it in relation to climate change, be it in relation to fight against racism, in relation to gender equality, that we are not able to bring them together. We'll do several virtual meetings with heads of state in different areas that are very relevant for us, but we will miss that contact, that personal contact that I believe is very important for diplomacy to be effective.
But if I could follow up, are those personal contacts producing the results you seek on the ground? Is it worth it, is the question.
But the truth is that in many situations I have the experience, the personal experience, that problems that had no solution were solved when I had the opportunity to be with both sides and to discuss with them a way forward. This has happened several times, not always, let's be clear, not always, but several times, and I still believe that personal contact is an essential tool in diplomatic efforts.
Well, that's the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, speaking to Sharon Bryce-Pease in New York earlier today, talking about what's likely to happen during the United Nations General Assembly. But I want us to return to that clip where the President took time to thank the World Health Organization in terms of what they have done for South Africa, but also for the continent. Let's take a listen at President Cyril Ramaphosa.
This achievement has also been recognized by the World Health Organization, which has been working closely with us to strengthen our response. As we said earlier, they have continued, that is the World Health Organization, to give us advice and have even deployed their top experts to our country. We're grateful for all the support we received from Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the World Health Organization, and his colleagues in Geneva, as well as the Africa Centers for Disease Control, and Prevention at the AU in Addis Ababa. Although we have made remarkable progress, a number of our people are still getting infected.
A number of our people are still getting infected. Therefore, let us all be vigilant. Wear your mask, wash your hands, keep a social distance. Aldrin, you do it.
But as we're heading to level 1, which we look forward to on the 1st of October. So we're going to go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we will be unpacking what's happening in Kenya in terms of their politics. We'll also be looking at Lesotho and then a special focus on the insurgency in Mozambique. Welcome back. You're still watching African Perspective with me, Aldrin Simpier. Tanzania's ruling party, CCM, has reiterated that it has no intention to amend the country's constitution. It comes amid suggestions that the incumbent presidential candidate, John Magufuli, wants to extend his time in office beyond the 10-year limit. SABC's Daniel Kijo has more.
Campaign season continues in Tanzania, with parties going around the country pleading for citizen votes. Speaking at a stop in Chato, President Magufuli's hometown, Dr. Ali Bashiru, who serves as CCM's Secretary General, reiterated that President Magufuli had no intention of extending his leadership beyond 2 terms. Dr. Bashiru said the president is just seeking another 5 years to complete 10 years as other presidents who have done before him. Tanzania's constitution limits the president's rule to 2 consecutive 5-year terms, but there have been calls to amend the law to extend the president's power.
There are people who say CCM wants to win many parliamentary seats so as to get the power to change the constitution to force a 3rd term. He has already said, and let me insist again, he only wants to complete his next 5 years, and once he is done with his term, he won't add even 1 second.
Dr. Magufuli is seeking re-election in the vote scheduled for October 28th this year, but he faces 14 challenges, including ex-Foreign Minister Benan Membe and Tundu Lissu, the candidate of Tanzania's main opposition party, Chadema. This week, the ruling party started its 2nd round of campaigning. Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
And continue to focus on elections. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta comes to the last 2 years of his 2nd and final term. His relationship with Deputy President William Ruto is further strained. Kenyatta has formed new political alliances, including with former arch-rival Raila Odinga, leaving out Ruto, who had been touted as his obvious successor. Not one to give up, Ruto has hit the campaign trail, hoping to retain his party's strongholds and to conquer new political frontiers. But without Uhuru's backing, can he win the 2022 presidential race to be Kenya's 5th president? Sarah Kimani has that story.
March 2018. After political tensions following a divisive general election, President Uhuru Kenyatta reached out to the Orange Democratic Movement's Raila Odinga. On the day, the two announced their intention to work together. Deputy President William Ruto was missing. That marked the beginning of a new political alliance and the slow end to another, the Jubilee Party, on which President Kenyatta and his deputy Ruto rode on to for their 2nd term in office.
We refuse to allow our diversity to kill our nation. We refuse to be the leaders under whose watch Kenya's lead into a failed nation.
That starting today, we will begin a process of bringing our people together. That we will begin a process of discussing what ails us and what creates division amongst us.
The agreement, known in Kenya as the handshake, has reshaped the country's political landscape and increased the jostling for Kenyatta's succession.
Launching the BBI.
Odinga, with Kenyatta's support, is backing constitutional reforms ahead of the next elections. Among the main proposals in the 9-point reform agenda is reconstituting the governance system and enhancing the decentralization of government services, or devolution. Ruto is, however, not keen on reforms. In his opinion, the reforms under the Building Bridges Initiative, BBI, are aimed at giving the Odinga faction a political advantage over his opponents.
The discussion and the conversation and the debate must change. It cannot continue to be about the leaders of Kenya, their positions, their interests, their issues. It must be about the 47 million of us.
With the realization that what seemed as a well-laid-out succession agreement between him and his boss is off the table, Ruto has gone all out to the campaign trail. Kenyatta has spoken out against premature election campaigns.
This is the deputy president who decided to champion his own political cause devoid of what the president thinks. In that way, you will always have issues of insubordination. And I think that's what happened. And perhaps it's a reason why the president is thinking that maybe the deputy president is too strong for me to work with. And for that reason, I may look for some other people to work with.
And so has Raila Odinga, who is raring to try his luck at the ballot a fifth time. Kenyatta has, however, not come out to clearly throw his weight behind a Raila Odinga presidency.
Whether he will support the former prime minister for presidency or not, that is the $1,000 question that everybody's asking. More or less $1 million question. Will he be able to support Honorable Raila Odinga? That has been his fierce critic over the years. Knowing the politics of this country and knowing the kind of deficit that is in this country among the politicians, nothing is impossible, and it could be possible that he can support him. But it is also possible that they can disagree before they get to 2022.
For now, the centre is still holding, although, unlike in the past, rarely are the two seen together in public. And Kenyatta seems to rely on Odinga for a political ear more than he does with his deputy, raising fears that the bromance is gone and the two may soon part ways.
He's an elected deputy president, he's not an appointed vice president, and for that reason, he's guarded by the Constitution for that matter. And as a result, it is very difficult, unless there's a Constitution, unless Parliament gets into it, and unless there's an impeachment of the office and the person holding the office of the deputy president, it's very difficult for you to say, I've fired you and go home.
Heightening political tensions in the East African nation 2 years before Kenyatta's term comes to an end. Sarah Kimani, SABC News in Nairobi, Kenya.
Lesotho's members of parliament have been capacitated with crucial skills on crisis communication during the COVID-19 pandemic. As transmission levels begin to fall and the need to reignite the economy becomes critical, many regional countries will be easing international travel restrictions, which means managing a second wave of the coronavirus will be vital.
The novel coronavirus has disrupted lives and left many African countries into economic depression. With countries easing down on travel restrictions, these members of parliament are having to learn new communication skills in time of crisis.
The SADC Parliamentary Forum, in partnership with its sister parliaments, like in Lesotho, is actively involved in promoting SRHR for the people in the SADC region, especially women, girls, juveniles, key populations, and vulnerable groups. The project focuses on strengthening legislative jurisdiction in partnership with CSOs in selected countries, and Lesotho being among them. I think there are about 14.
As the pandemic shows the signs of slowing down in Africa, it is now critical to strengthen the quality of messages cascading down to citizens to be more vigilant as they return to normal economic activity.
They are empowering us as members of parliament to be able to go and talk to the communities on the fact that there's going to be high risk because now there's going to be a lot of movement. There are a lot of infections in South Africa as well as in Lesotho, and the movement will cause a lot of risk. In that risk, it's how do you control the risk? No, they are teaching us to say you have to educate your people of the fact that this COVID-19 is there It's going to be there. What you need to do is to care for yourself, take precautions, make sure that you do what the WHO needs you to do. So it means to us as two countries is saying intensify your testing programs, sit together, find out the way of working together as two countries to be able to say, if my people are going to travel to your country, they must be COVID-free. Because if we don't do that, there's going to be a lot of infections. Much as the borders are being open, but you have to be particular about the risk. And in that risk, we have to make sure that we control such risks.
And without necessary controls and adequate human resources, some members express worry.
My biggest concern, as we have been told by the scientists, that we should expect a second wave of COVID-19. So we should make sure that now our preparedness should be optimal, because now we are aware of this. It cannot be the same as the first one, because we are not even aware. We are panicking. We end up doing things which are unnecessary. But now I think we have to sit down and make a good plans to really advocate for this and make sure that our preparedness is we are ready, we are prepared for everything, so that we can be able to manage this serial killer.
There's a high possibility that the borders are going to reopen. South Africa is proposing to open the borders. But the big question is our country, is our Ministry of Health ready for the port health to be ready to capacitate all the people who are coming into to Lesotho? Are they ready with PPE? Are they ready with human resource at the borders? Are they ready with all the equipment that is needed at the border to make sure that they gather all the information, they make follow-up, they do some transfers to health facilities? I don't think we are ready yet. We have not been capacitated enough. This is our first time, and we need to go and tell the community about the information which we gathered here. But it's not enough. That is why you heard that some members of parliament here, they requested that the Minister of Health and other moderators, they should go to parliament and make a presentation to all the members of parliament as a group, because this is news to us. This is our first time we come to such a workshop.
This workshop has been able to tackle even some of the complex cases of domestic violence, of which Lesotho does not have a specific law to deal with, thus giving the perpetrators much room to manipulate the law.
So with the absence of Domestic Violence Act in the country, we have seen a lot and lots of femicide cases during COVID. We have seen a number of domestic violence cases happening, which in most cases were not dealt with adequately, such that even the police, as we speak, are overwhelmed because the cases were increasing or are increasing from time to time. So the absence of the Domestic Violence Act in Lesotho has created quite a very huge challenge in as far as dealing directly with the cases that are concerned. So, for example, like I indicated, that we have a number of femicide cases. Those are not taken as femicide as I'm speaking. They are taken as murder, and that's it. As what contributed to such a case being a murder case is no more considered.
As Africa slowly returns to a new normal, the COVID-19 remains a threat with a possibility of a new wave of reinfection. And until a vaccine is readily available, robust and vigilant measures will have to remain in place for the foreseeable future. Rapelang Khatebe, SABC News, Masego, Lesotho.
And welcome back. You're still watching African Perspective with me, Aldrin Simpier. Just a warning to our viewers that the visuals on the following story have graphic visuals that are part of trying to tell the story of what's happening in Mozambique. So Mozambique's military has condemned as horrifying footage that has emerged on Monday of men in military uniform beating and executing a naked woman, unarmed as well. But rights group Amnesty International says it is not the first time allegations of such abuses have emerged.
Men in military uniforms pursue a naked, unarmed woman along a road in northern Mozambique. They beat her with a stick before shooting her in the back as she tries to flee. Mozambique's army has called the footage above all condemnable. But David Massigné from rights group Amnesty International says it's not the first such allegation against the military.
That this kind of evidence has come out is significant in the sense that it fits perfectly with all the evidence and the allegations that we have seen.
Mozambique's defense and security forces went on to say it does not agree with any barbaric act that substantiates the violation of human rights. It did not specifically deny that government soldiers were responsible, but also called for the video's authenticity to be investigated. Amnesty's Massigné says they've ascertained it was shared privately on September the 7th. In the video, the soldiers taunt the woman as Al-Shabaab, the local term for an Islamist group operating in the area, and Massigné said a number of factors suggest the perpetrators could be government soldiers.
The guns they are using, what they are saying, the languages they are speaking, and the location where these events are taking place, the outfit of the soldiers all point in the direction of the armed forces of Mozambique.
After a recent escalation in the insurgency in an area that is home to gas projects by oil majors such as Total, the security forces responded. Last week, Amnesty International said it had verified videos showing attempted beheadings, torture and other ill treatment of prisoners, the dismemberment of alleged opposition fighters and possible extrajudicial executions. The government dismissed those allegations, saying insurgents regularly impersonated soldiers in an attempt to confuse national and international opinion.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced that South Africa will move to lockdown alert level 1 from midnight on Sunday. This effectively means that level 1 will take effect from early Monday morning, the 21st of September. In a live address, the president opened international travel and eased restrictions on social gatherings.
My fellow South Africans, a month ago, the significant decrease in new infections enabled the country to move to coronavirus alert level 2. Now, with the further progress we've made as infections have come down, we are now ready for a new phase in our response to the pandemic. We have withstood the coronavirus storm. Now is the time to return our country, its people, and our economy to a situation that is more normal, that more resembles the lives that we were living 6 months ago. It is time to move to what will become what we call our new normal, for as long as the coronavirus is with us. While much economic activity resumed from June, it is now time to remove as many of the remaining restrictions on economic and social activity as it is reasonably safe to do. Following consultations with a number of stakeholders, provincial, local government, traditional leaders, and drawing on the advice of scientists and engagements with various stakeholders, Cabinet decided this morning that the country should now move to alert level 1. The move to alert level 1 will take effect from midnight on Sunday, the 20th of September 2020. This move recognizes that levels of infections are relatively low and that there is sufficient capacity in our health system to manage the current need.
Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic has rearranged South Africa's political calendar, but the Independent Electoral Commission says local government elections in South Africa will go ahead as planned next year. The electoral body has also suggested dates for next year's poll.
The countdown to the local government elections has started. Final arrangements, including the date, are still under discussion. But the IEC says everything is ready to hold a free and fair election.
Therefore, an election must happen between the 3rd of August and the 3rd of November. Consultation with the Minister of COGTA has commenced. And that consultation is related to a discussion about the optimum period next year on which an election can be held, rather a date on which that election could be held. And we hope that in the not too distant future, a date will be agreeable between the Commission and the Minister, noting, of course, that the statutory authority for that determination is, in fact, the Minister, having consulted the Commission.
The arrival of the coronavirus earlier this year disorganized the IEC as it was about to facilitate by-elections. Eased lockdown restrictions and now low COVID-19 infections now give room for the IEC to hold those by-elections.
According to Section 25 of the Municipal Structures Act, by-elections may not be called 6 months ahead of general municipal elections. That means we need to clear the backlog between now and February, because after February, there can never be other elections until we hold the local government elections.
Earlier in June, the Constitutional Court made a landmark ruling citing that independent candidates may now contest for provincial and national elections. It has given the National Assembly 24 months to make the necessary amendments.
In respect of this, following the June ruling, Parliament is now leading the legislative amendment process, and as the Commission, we have offered our full support and assistance from a technical point of view. The Commission is mindful that the electoral system adopted by a country is in fact a matter of significant national interest, which will have a far-reaching implication for its constitutional democracy.
Meanwhile, South Africa is not the only country to postpone its by-elections. Neighboring Zimbabwe also halted its by-elections. Recently, the country's Electoral Commission announced that they would soon publish its by-election schedule. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And SABC News' foreign desk editor, Sophie Mukwena, joins me yet again. Sophie, just a quick one on looking at the elections that have been postponed because of COVID-19, but here also hearing from the IEC saying that our local government elections will go ahead, but we've seen that with other countries, they've decided to postpone their elections.
Yes, of course, the COVID-19 has disrupted many countries in different levels, and therefore elections were affected. Even though countries such as Burundi did go to elections, Tanzania is going to elections, South Africa at some point in time took a decision to postpone the by-elections. But it looks like now IEC stands ready to conduct those by-elections and also to prepare for local government elections next year. You can hear the hit from political parties in the country that we are now working towards local government elections, and with many parties in the ballot, and it remains to be seen who's going to be victorious. Looking at the challenges the country is facing, whether the opposition in South Africa will take advantage of the current disgruntlement and also frustrations all over the country because of COVID-19. Let's wait and see. But when you look at Zimbabwe as well, Zimbabwe now, they are going to have their own by-elections. Recently, we saw the MDC party in turmoil and a decision to recall councillors, and therefore we'll see whether will it be Nelson Chamisa's MDC or people, or it will be Thokozani Kupe's people who will win some of those wards that were mainly belonging to the MDC, and therefore quite interesting times in the SADC region. And you know, politics, I don't envy the political editors at this moment.
Nobody wants your job right now. Thank you so much. That is Sophie Mukwena, SABC News' foreign desk editor. Just a quick apology to our viewers. We were supposed to have a special focus on the insurgency in Mozambique. However, we have some technical problems getting a hold of our guest, Babu Khomo. He will be joining us hopefully next week when we try and have that conversation yet again and put it on the table because of the urgency around that matter. From me, Aldrin St. Pierre, and the rest of the team, it is bye-bye. Unfortunately, we don't have the young old man standing by, but he will be with you just after this. That's Peter Ndoro with The Globe. Goodbye.